everybody! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Last week we made these cute little baby slippers in the classic wrap style, and I asked all of you if you might want to make a pair for the rest of the members of the family. There was a big loud resounding yes to that, so that's what we're going to do this week. This week I'm going to show you guys how to make a template so that you can make these classic wrap style slippers for any sized foot in the family. We've written up the pattern and it's available for free on our website, along with the one we did last week for the little baby slippers, and we'll put the link to that in the description box down below. So, without further ado, let's grab some yarn, grab some pom-poms, grab our hooks, a notepad, and a pen. Let's head on over to the craft table and stitch up some slippers together. For today's slippers, I'm using a nice thick worsted weight yarn in acrylic. This is Red Heart Comfort, but you can use cotton, bamboo, wool, or even t-shirt yarn, whatever you feel would make a nice comfortable slipper. We're going to need a piece of paper and a pen to make a template and some notes. You're going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. I'm using a 5.5mm hook or an I9. You may also need a safety pin or a stitch marker. A measuring tape could be handy, I'll explain that in a moment. A calculator, and in order to decorate our slippers, a couple of fancy pom-poms. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. We begin by making our template. Put your piece of paper on a nice flat surface like the tile floor. Place the foot you're making the slipper for squarely in the middle of the paper. Take your pen and just simply trace an outline around the whole foot. Once we've got our template made, we want to add a few notes and take a couple of measurements. First, and most importantly, write down the name of the person that the foot belongs to. Then we're going to measure. This is really handy if you're making slippers for people you haven't got readily available. You can have them make the same kind of template, grab a measuring tape, take the widest measurement of the foot, and for me that is 9 centimeters, and the tallest measurement of the foot, and that would be from the top of the big toe down to the bottom of the heel, and for me that's 23 centimeters. Write that measurement down, and now the following. The sole is what we're building our slipper on. So you're going to want to make note of the chains, the stitches, and these are short forms, your decrease row, and your total rows, and then a little while later something called side stitches. We're going to fill in all of these things as we go. It's very important that you make note of it as we go with slipper number 1, because that is what you're going to use to make slipper number 2. Other notes you might want to include are wool sensitivity or the kind of yarn you're going to use, especially if you're going to make more slippers for the same person down the road. Make note of the size of the hook you used and any other little notes that you found handy as you went. Then you can put the whole thing in your project journal and pull it out later when you want to make more slippers. We're going to begin by crocheting the sole of our slipper, and we want to start with a slip knot. Then you're going to chain a length that fits across the widest part of your template. Try not to chain too tightly. You want to make sure that you've got a bit of stretch in your foundation chain row. I've chained 11 and I've laid it down across the widest part of my foot template. And with a little bit of stretching, not too much, but just a little bit, I can see that it comfortably fits across the whole template. Remember, there is stretch in this fabric, especially when you put it on someone who walks, because walking will stretch out the fabric. So a little bit of tugging, I can see that it will easily cover my whole foot. So 11 is the chained length I am going to begin with. We're going to use the half double crochet stitch. So once you've got a chained length that you're comfortable with, skip the first chain from the hook, look at the second, and half double crochet into it, and half double crochet into each stitch across. At the end of row 1, you should have 1 stitch number less than the number of chains you started with. So I started with 11 chains, I have 10 half double crochets. We're going to chain 1, turn our work, And you're going to half double crochet into every stitch all the way back. So you'll still have the same number of stitches in row 2 as you had in row 1. And at the end of row 2, we're going to check our gauge. I'm at the end of row 2, so I pull up on my loop and I get my template ready. And I'm going to put this down inside the widest part of my foot. Now, with a little bit of stretching or no stretching at all, it should sit comfortably on the line or just inside it. So that's the widest part of my foot. I can move it around to all the wide bits and it sits on the line or just inside it. If that's what you've got the right stitch count for your template. So you write down the number of chains you started with. In my case, it was 11. And then you write down the number of stitches you have across, just so you can eyeball it as you go. And for me, that's 10 stitches in every row. If you're too big, I recommend you take the whole thing out, start again with a foundation chain row that's one less, and then get to the end of row 2 and check your gauge. If you're much too small, take it out, start again with a foundation chain row that's one stitch more than you started with, get to the end of row 2, and check your gauge. It's very important that you have a gauge that works comfortably for your template. Believe me, you'll thank you later when you get to the end of your slipper and it fits. If you've got a piece of fabric that fits your template perfectly, we can continue. We're going to chain 1, turn our work, and continue the half double crochet stitch into every stitch across. You're going to work the same row repeated, the same stitch repeated, until you cover 3/4 of your template. And I'll show you what that looks like when I get to it. Once you've crocheted back and forth, same stitches in every row for a while, lay it down and see where it falls on your foot template. So line it up with the very tallest point of your foot, so the top of your big toe. It should sit on or just inside the line, and it should cover approximately 3/4 of your foot template. Once you're at that point, you want to start to decrease, and that's where this little decrease row comes in. So I've covered 3/4 of my template. I am 15 rows into my piece of work, and my very next row is going to be my decrease row. So on my little note, or my template here, I'm going to write decrease row 16. So I've completed 15 rows of my sole, and row number 16 will be my decrease row. This is the decrease row. Chain 1, turn your work, half double crochet the first 2 stitches together. So you wrap and pick up a loop, and you can either wrap and pick up a loop in the second stitch or skip the wrap altogether. Wrap for the final bit, pull back through everything. That makes a very thick half double crochet 2 stitches together. This is the other way you can do it. Wrap your yarn, pick up a loop in the next stitch, and then wrap and pull back through everything. It's a little bit thinner, but it still does the same thing. It combines 2 stitches into one. Half double crochet across the rest of that row until you get to the last 2 stitches. We're going to half double crochet those 2 together as well. Wrap, pick up a loop in the second last stitch, pick up a loop in the last stitch. Remember, your last stitch always curves down the side a little bit. Wrap, pull back through everything, and that's half double crochet 2 stitches together. So my row count, my row stitch count, has gone from 10 down to 8. So now I'm going to continue working back and forth, chain 1, turn my work, half double crochet in each stitch across, and my next few rows are only going to be 8 stitches long, or 2 stitches less than what my row count or my stitch count was originally. And now I'm going to go back and forth until I've got a piece of fabric that pretty much covers the whole template of my foot. Alright, I'm at row 20. I've pulled up on my loop so I don't have anything unravel. I'm going to put the very top of my toe up against the line of my toe, And with a little bit of stretching, my piece of fabric should almost completely cover my template. So there's just a little bit left in the toe, but if I stretch it, it'll cover it neatly. And remember, when you step on a slipper, it will spread. So if there's not enough room to put in another row, another whole row, then you're done. So for me, that's 20 rows in total. So I'm going to write total rows 20. So now I know that in order to begin my second slipper, I need to begin by chaining 11. My stitch count across each row will be 10. Once I get to my decrease row, which is row number 16, I'll be down to 8 stitches, but I know enough to decrease. And my total rows will be 20 in total. If you need to add extra notes, like your decrease row is half double crochet 2 together at the beginning and end, you can make a note about that. And then your new stitch count, just so that you know what you're doing as you get to the end of your slipper. But this is the basic number of notes that you should have on your sole. And that is your sole piece. So once you're finished, you can fasten off. I'm just going to put my hook back in here. You don't need very much tail. Pull it back through the loop on your hook, nice and tight, and then grab your yarn needle and weave in both of the short tails that you have at each end of your piece of fabric. The next thing we want to figure out is the number of side stitches we're going to need for the side pieces of our slipper. So here's where a calculator comes in handy. You're going to take the number of total rows. So the total number of rows in my sole is 20. And you're going to multiply that number by 1.2. So for me, that's 24. If you get a number with a decimal, just round up or down to the closest whole number. So my side stitch count is 24. Now what does that mean? Well, that's the number of stitches you want to aim for as you work up the side of the piece of your sole. And we're going to do that by working directly onto the sole. So we're going to create another slip knot. And we're going to begin at the toe. So you slip your hook in underneath the first chain of the foundation chain row, join with a slip stitch, chain 1, only 1. We're still using the half double crochet stitch. So you're going to half double crochet into the same place as you joined. And then you're going to work a half double crochet into each raw edge, so all along the raw edge of your slipper. But because half double crochets are taller than they are wide, that's why you want a number to aim for. So for me, I'm going to aim for 24 side stitches worked up the side of my sole. If you're one up or one down, it doesn't matter. Just be sure to write that number down because you want to aim to get the same number of stitches across the other side of your sole when you work down the other raw edge. And that is the number of stitches you want to make sure you use when you make your second slipper so that they both fit properly. Because I'm working 24 stitches, or aiming to, up the side of my sole, I know that when I get to about the halfway mark, I want to have finished 12 half double crochets. So that's kind of a nice way to eyeball how many stitches you're at. So my halfway mark, I should have 12 half double crochets so far, and aim to put in another 12. Your first half double crochet counts, and your last half double crochet will count, and that'll be the whole side stitch count. So I'm going to work away, putting half double crochets up the raw side of my slipper. You just pick up a piece of a stitch, just place your hook in wherever you feel the next stitch would naturally go if there was an actual stitch to stick something into. Try to make sure that they're not too close together and not too far apart, so nice and even, and aim for that number that we figured out based on the number of rows in your sole. I'm about to work my last half double crochet along my raw edge, and I'm going to work it into what is the first stitch of my toe row, or I should say my heel row. So I'm actually going to work it right into that and it's going to count as a side stitch. Now that works out to be exactly 24 for me, and you'll notice that it's not puckering, it's not too many, it's not too few, so that looks nice and tidy to me. So that's 24 stitches along the side. I am not going to work an extra stitch into the corner because we want the heel to form. So I'm just going to work a half double crochet into each stitch across the heel section. And now I'm at the last stitch. The last stitch in the heel section is going to count as the first stitch for my other side. And because I worked 24 half double crochets up this side, I want to work 24 half double crochets up my other side. That will keep it nice and even. And then I want to make sure I do the same thing when I make my second slipper. I've just worked the 24th half double crochet of my second side into the top of the toe row. So you see it's joined in the chain, one of the chains, the last chain actually, of my toe row. Now I'm just going to get my hook out of the way, grab my safety pin or my stitch marker, and put it in right where I joined my yarn to start the sides of my slipper. So this is going to act as a marker so that I can easily count my rows as I go. We're going to work back and forth, back and forth. You do not work the toe. The toe is left open. Chain one, turn your work, and begin half double crocheting in every stitch all the way back around. So whatever your stitch count is at the end of this row, and that would be your side stitch count times 2, plus whatever stitches you worked across the back of the heel. So for me, the total stitch count is 54. It's not really important, but if you're the type that accidentally doubles up or skips stitches, then you might want to have it in mind, just so that you know where you should be at the end of every row. How many rows, Jada? Well, if you're working slippers for children, 5 or 6 rows worked back and forth for the upper is a good number to gauge your sizing at. If you're using slightly skinnier yarn, you may want to add more rows. If you're using slightly thicker yarn, you might want to use fewer rows. Also depends on the size of the foot for the child. For ladies, I recommend 7 rows, and for men and teenage boys, I'd say 8 or 9 rows depending on how big their feet are. I am going to use 7 rows for my slipper because I know that that will be a nice height and it will wrap neatly over the top of my foot. So I'm going to work back and forth, chain 1, turn at the end of every row, continuing my half double crochet, and I'll see you at the end of 7 rows for a lady's slipper. I have finished working 7 rows back and forth and back and forth. You can see that there is a little boat, or certainly a foot shape happening here. There's my heel. The toe is still open, and I can count. I put my little stitch marker in at the bottom of my first row of the side piece, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows of half double crochet. That's all I'm going to do. I'm now going to fasten off, and I want to leave a nice long tail for sewing up the toe part of my slipper. So enough yarn that I figure I'll need to sew up that bit. Doesn't really require a whole lot. I'm going to grab my yarn needle, get my pen out of the way, thread up my tail. There we go. I'm just going to leave that safety pin there for a minute because I want to fold my pieces in and make sure that I don't go over top of the width of my toe. So I've already made my first slipper, and I folded in the right side and then the left side. So that's my first slipper. So for my second slipper, I'm going to fold over the left side first and then the right side on top. So right where my marker is going to be the first bend. I'm going to just stretch that across and then stretch the second side up and over top so that I can sew through all 3 pieces. And that's going to look something like this. So there's the corner. I'm just going to get the corner of the bend and the first bit of the edge of the top piece. I'm going to remove my safety pin. And now I'm going to work my way across, and I am going to make sure that I get all 3 pieces every time I sew. So if I pick up a piece of the bottom, the middle, and the top, and I'm going to whip stitch. So bottom, middle, and top. And I'm going to sew through all 3 sides, or 3 pieces, all the way across my toe. Once you get all the way across, flip over your work, and you can weave the long tail left behind in underneath the stitches of that toe row. You can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until all of your tail is used up, or if you've got a lot of tail used up, then back and forth at least 3 times, and that will ensure that your yarn doesn't unravel. And this way we don't have to put any uncomfortable knots in at the toe or the other corner of our slipper. Now's a good time to make note of some final things. So my total stitch count for the upper part of my sides was 54, so that way I know what to look for when I'm going through each row of the side piece. And the total number of rows of the side piece was 7. That's 7 for me. I made note of that so that when I go to make number 2, they'll be the same and I don't have to sit there and do any counting. Once you've got that done, you can cross your left and right sides and just tack them together by sewing in a pom-pom. And you don't have to do this, you can leave this open. This is what closes over your foot. Nice and loosey-goosey, there's a lot of stretch there. So if you make them on the small side, that's okay because your foot will stretch it out. Plus they'll stretch out a bit when you're walking. So I'm going to go ahead and add my second pom-pom, and then my little pair of slippers will be done. At last, cozy, warm feet for all members of the family. So now you know how to make slippers for the really, really big feet and the really, really small feet and all the feet in between. Oh, I get a lot of questions about some of the tools we use on the show here, especially this particular wool needle. And all of you who are interested in getting a set of these wool needles, you can find a link to them on the shop page of our website. We'll put the link in the description box down below, but if you're looking for a set of these wool needles with the large loop eye, it does make it easier to thread up, especially if you're a little hard of sight, then you might want to check that out. And some links to some of the other products we use here on the show are also there. So if you're interested, give that a check. And that's it for this week, everyone. I hope you had fun making these slippers along with me. We will see you again soon on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week. Bye!